greasy long hair from lack of bathing, perpetually stained t-shirt, discoloration on teeth due to excessive consumption of Diet Coke, skin white as snow from lack of sunlight, prognosis YouTuber.
Hello? Who said that?
Someone larger than that?
This year marks a special point for the Sherlock cinematic universe, as the franchise is finally in public domain after the copyright held by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle is finally expired.
See you later, stinky.
And while this may seem like great news for all Sherlock lovers worldwide who are finally allowed to use these beloved characters in their stories, I'm a little afraid to see the sheer amount of published fan fictions. Unless it's about these two. And with the mere thousands of Sherlocks we're going to see portrayed in books, games, and on screen in the next few years, today I want to talk about the long history of Sherlock Holmes in movies, and maybe more interestingly, how they portrayed intelligence. A Study in Scarlet. Doyle's first mention of Sherlock, released in 1888, where we follow the now beloved neurodivergent detective as he uses the science of deduction and friendship with Dr. John Watson to solve the unsolvable. In the decades following, the series and characters became worldwide icons. However, as time has passed and technology has gotten better and better, we have created a new form of storytelling. But as these stories became alive again, there was an added challenge. As a filmmaker, your main goal should always be to show, not tell. But how were these creatives supposed to portray a mind like Holmes without needing an explanation for every single decision or deduction he makes? Well, don't think too hard, because I do have a pretty good answer for the majority. Watson. If not already spelled out to the entire room, then we have Watson as a viewer to ask the questions that we're not able to. Like, for example, how he'll connect a wrinkled shirt to diabetes. I don't know! But outside of this loophole, over the decades we've had many adaptations find unique ways to relay the inner workings of Sherlock's wonderfully damaged brain. There's just one problem. There's over 100 years of content about this guy, so I'm gonna have to prepare. Now you may think this is a huge gap in years, and you'd be right, but the majority of these films are either silent, too short to be even considered a TikTok, or just don't exist, no matter how hard I scoured the internet for them. The year 1900 was the first time Sherlock ever appeared on screen. Was it only a 30-second clip in an arcade machine, and probably the most confusing thing I've ever watched? Yes. But don't come at me, because if you watch it yourself, he's literally just chasing a teleporting home invader. But moving on to 1916, this is where we see the actual first feature-length adaptation put on film. And this was another silent one, which they all were until the late 30s, so get used to it. And it's pretty much how you'd expect an hour-and-a-half long version of mute Sherlock solving boring crimes would be. But something cool to point out is that this actor actually coined most of the wardrobe, especially the iconic hat that Sherlock wears, for the future of all adaptations. And besides the length of his deduction work being walking around a room slowly and making baseless accusations that turn out to be true, the best part was hands down Moriarty. He was putting in the work. After this, jumping only 5 years to 1921, the Stoll Pictures production house began the longest running series of Sherlock Holmes ever created, even to this day. And even though most of these episodes were lost to the sands of time, this Sherlock was still my favorite for this time period. We get a more chaotic and decisive character who takes times with each deduction to lay out the story easily. And if you throw in messing with some chemicals and dramatic acting to fool the enemy, it makes sense this was Doyle's favorite Sherlock too. 1931, however, is where it all changed. No more silent films. No more title cards just giving us the information. No, they just say it out loud now. There's no real change. I will give credit where it's due that this Sherlock is more of a socially awkward depiction of the character that we see today. But any and all deductions were done from any point in the room where he just points it out and says that it's fact. All these versions, honestly, were boiled down to just someone reading Sherlock Holmes to you instead of reading it yourself. It lacked any visual knowledge or nuance to make these connections meaningful. And surprisingly, it's a difficult, bland watch. To sum up this version of Sherlock, it's kind of like you're watching a play where you don't have many sets and things are just told to you from afar that you really have to suspend your disbelief to care about. Okay, now you must be thinking, this is an even bigger gap in years. What are you doing? Just watch the video and enjoy, okay? This new talkies age didn't end with this series in 1931 in the UK. No, they felt the need to bring it to the US in 1939. However, this one is interesting to say the least. So originally, these first two films took place in the Victorian era, the first ever to be authentic to their original story and not be modernized for the audience. But as you know, modern for this time was considered 1940, and I'm sure you all know what else happened in the 1940s. Yeah, we got a Nazi fight in Sherlock. But more importantly than the obvious use of this show as a wartime propaganda, this Sherlock was actually a pretty good adaptation. His interaction with others, disguises, and visual cues given to each deduction made it a pretty enjoyable watch. Well, despite Watson being made a fumbling idiot on purpose to prop up Sherlock as a super genius, which in a weird way totally destroyed the dynamic of their relationship. Now, forgive me if I do these next ones in a speed round. Everyone just wanted to make a Sherlock Holmes movie, I guess. Okay, 1959 and 1962. Same setup, no difference, baseless deductions. 1965 marks a special year. We were actually given the first Sherlock fully in color, and something more important to the aspect of filmmaking, inserts. To aid all his visual deductions, we were given inserts, close-ups, and examples and explanations that weren't just read off a script. In 1976 is the first time we actually see the character struggle with his addiction and focus less on his deductions and more of the personal side of the character.
Oh, call an ambulance! Call an ambulance! But not for me!
1984 Jimmy Brent's Sherlock is unironically the most iconic Sherlock of this time period. Such a fun watch and definitely part of my top 3. I mean, just look at that smile. 1985 Young Sherlock Holmes. This movie is full of charm, craziness, and a great cast, and 100% worth watching. And just a side note to all my VFX artists out there, this is the first movie in history we had a full CGI character. And finally 1988, where it marks the end of this age of new Sherlock adaptations every other year. However, this wasn't a typical movie. This is actually a parody, where Watson is the genius detective, and he uses Sherlock as a puppet, basically, or a cover. I don't really understand it, to be honest. It was pretty funny though, and I'm sure no future parodies are going to be completely insufferable and less funny. But if you're still with me, let's finally get into what you clicked in the video for. After 90 years of exhausting the Sherlock Holmes genre, we finally learned to take a break, which surprisingly lasted for 21 years, ending in 2009 when a new game was afoot. Sorry. Everything changed when Guy Ritchie and a new and upcoming actor, Robert Downey Jr., gave us a whole new experience into the world of Sherlock Holmes. It perfectly mixed the unhinged personality, thrill-addicted, and always 3 steps ahead of you Sherlock, who can use his expansive set of skills from organic chemistry to street fighting to solve the case. Guy Ritchie, the creator and director, went on to say that all the previous renditions of Sherlock were unfaithful to the action portrayed in the books. Holmes was reverted to an armchair detective, and it wasn't until this movie where we saw him use his intelligence as a superpower. It created a character who is physically and mentally superior, as he should be. But more importantly, for the first time, it gave us an actual glimpse into the mind of our protagonist. Instead of just being told the afterthoughts, we're included in the precise and calculated steps he takes for the best result. Working in a slow-mo narrative format, this movie opened up Pandora's box to a more insightful, action-packed film, with new highly crafted inserts to visually identify the collection of evidence he uses to make a deduction, pulling us deeper into the story more than anything before.
Discombobulate. Dazed, he'll attempt wild haymaker, employ elbow block, and body shot. In summary, ears ringing, jaw fractured, 3 ribs cracked, 4 broken, diaphragm hemorrhaging. Physical recovery 6 weeks. Full psychological recovery 6 months.
And finally, in my opinion, the best adaptation of an on-screen Sherlock, Will Ferrell. I'm kidding, it's the original BBC 2010 series, Sherlock. If you take a shot every time I say Sherlock in this video, I mean, you're gonna need your stomach pumped or something, like, or you're dead already, sorry. In the 4-season-long, modernized version of the adventures of Doctor Strange and Bilbo Baggins, we're introduced to a deeply multifaceted Sherlock who has complex layers, relationships, and for the first time, an actual character arc, as well as the best Moriarty hands down ever seen on screen. But as most of my research, it comes down to this: how do they portray intelligence? But in this version of Sherlock, we're in the passenger seat, as every observation, every possible idea, and every piece of knowledge he might need that's relevant to the situation is projected around him like words or symbols on a screen, where sometimes we even see him physically pull these words into the front of his brain, highlighting the way his mind constantly observes the world around him. absorbing everything into his database, which he quite literally calls his hard drive. This visual comparison of his mental process to a computer very literally blurs the line to his humanity. His observations are cold, factual, machine, void of social or emotional implications, which is half the reason he has Watson. The other half, oh man. Moreover, we see his obsession with power and control through Benedict's amazing performance and the wonderful writing that creates a sympathetic sociopath. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle once said, "Edgar Allan Poe, the father of mystery and detective novels, was a model for all time, despite Poe and Doyle's obvious difference in the way they viewed intelligence." As explained thoroughly, Doyle has shown that intelligence cannot exist in emotion, while Poe believes the capacity for knowledge requires emotional intelligence and the ability to understand and respond to others. But maybe that's why we see Sherlock become less robotic and more attached to those around him as he learns sometimes the easiest deductions are the most important. Thank you guys all for watching. I really hope you enjoyed this journey through cinematic history with me. As technology and creative freedom continue to expand, Sherlock makes it easy to follow the evolution of storytelling. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. If you guys want to see more journeys through cinematic history, leave a comment about who you want to see next. And as always, thanks for watching.